So I'm recording this session now. So I'm going to introduce myself again. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mina Ju from CACUK. That stands for Class Action COVID UK, which is a legal case against the UK government for the COVID measures that have been causing harm to people since early last year. And this session is always on the third Friday of every month. It's called Legal Surgery, and it's part of our Freedom Fridays that we do, which we do on the first 3 Fridays of the month. And in this session, I've asked if anybody has questions about the COVID issues and the legality of COVID issues, if they want to bring those questions forward. And we will try to discuss those. Now, I would just say straight up front, I'm not a lawyer. I have a law degree. I've got a postgraduate law degree, which is called a Juris Doctor, if that means anything to anybody. And my Juris Doctor is actually in Australia, which is very similar to English law. So I've started this case, so I know I have a kind of working knowledge of the law, if you like, and I'm able to answer some questions. I'm not able to answer others, but I may be able to direct you into to where to go to find that knowledge. So I'm just going to open up now, and if you'd like to speak, you are allowed to unmute yourself. And yes, I have a list of questions actually that I've already copied and pasted into a sheet, which nobody wants to start. But does anybody have a question that they want to start out with? Great. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this, and hello everybody. So I'm self-employed, which is a challenge, and I've lost 95% of the work I had pre-2020. I had a job where I was supposed to deliver some training on Monday and Tuesday, and friend stayed with me, flew in on a plane, was told to isolate for Omicron, and because they the government website brought in new rules that regardless of your status, everybody has to isolate with Omicron and for 10 days, and the people that you live with. So consequently, it meant that I couldn't go to do my job for 2 days, and they're refusing to pay me. And so I wondered if you had any insight into the legality of that, because I fulfilled all the days I've prepared for it and all of that stuff won't be paid for me, and neither will the 2 days that I wasn't able to deliver. I offered to do it virtually. They said that wouldn't work. And the work then went to that the company will still be paid because they replaced me with full-time employees. But I wondered if there's anything around that you had insight into.
So just so you know, Helen, I'm still really struggling to hear you, so I'm trying my best to actually hear what you're saying, and I'll tell you just what I've picked up from you. I'm just seeing if I can actually just change the settings of the mic. Okay, so you're saying that because of the government's restrictions, you were being forced to isolate due to the rules about Omicron, is that correct?
Yeah, and so I couldn't deliver the work. I offered to do it virtually, and they said that wouldn't work, and now they're saying they won't pay me.
Okay, so yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think I can, like I say, I can only answer to the best of my knowledge and ability and understanding. And my understanding of this situation is that you are being legally forced to not work because of the government's imposition on you. And if that's a legality, if there's no way that you can get around that, and that's legislated that you must stay at home and not go to work, then it's the government that then you need to take action against. All right.
Okay.
So that situation has not been brought about because of your employer. It's been brought about because of the government. So it's the government that has imposed something on you. So there ought to be something in place where you can then claim compensation from the government for work that you have lost. And do you know if there's anything like that available for freelance workers? Because I don't personally know. I'm not an employment.
Not for freelance. It said from what I could understand, it said if you are fully employed, you're entitled to something, or if you're on universal credit,
okay,
you're entitled to something.
and what about self-employed?
Nothing.
Nothing for
Nothing
self-employed.
mentioned.
Okay. And do you know if that what you're following is guidance or legislation?
I don't. I went off the government website.
Okay. Would you know how to ascertain if it was guidance or law?
No.
Okay. So if you go into the, if you can post the link, the government website that you've gone onto to get the information that tells you that you must stay at home, can you post that link into the chat, and I'll open it up and then we'll see if we can have a look at that.
Sure. Might take me a moment to find it. I don't know if you want to take another question in the interim.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, do that. And when you do, just let me know. So I've got a few hands up. So, and I don't know whose hand went up first. So I'm just going to say at random, Mercedes, do you want to speak?
Yes, the question was, on one of the Zoom meetings, somebody said that if you use the form, the 119 form, and you don't write anything about your conditions or anything on it, and you just put I do not consent, then that would be a reason for exemption.
So can you hear me, Mercedes?
Yes. Yeah.
So you're talking about once you've received the form and you filled it out and then you give it to your doctor, is that what you're saying?
Yes, but I probably might not have understood it correctly, but I think the person who talked about it said that you don't have to fill in your health conditions or anything. You just put on the form, I do not consent, and that's it.
Well, then that's not a medical exemption, is it? I mean, the problem is it's a real stitch up because they're not allowing private GPs to process the exemption. So I'm sure a lot of people would go to their private GP or private consultant if they've got health problems, and they're much more likely to get an exemption through the private GP. The national health GPs are, and I've spoken to 3 now, 2 in the hospital and my local GP, and they say quite clearly we are against giving exemptions. So you've got a massive obstacle to overcome.
I understand that, but the reason I'm asking here is because it's a legal question, and if you go on the NHS website, it tells you that you have to be able to give informed consent, and you cannot be given a treatment without your consent. So if you put on the form that you do not consent, you cannot be given informed consent. So they surely have to exempt you, don't they? I mean, I'm asking legally whether that's true or not.
Let me answer that for you, Mercedes. So I've done a video which is called Assert Your Vax Exemption. It's on YouTube and it's in the CACUK channel. Now, in that video, I did cover that question. The issue we're facing at the moment with COVID is that the government is acting illegally, and so what they're doing is they're putting out policies and guidance disguised as law, and they're making people believe it. So there's a whole string of connections that you have to make to realize why this is not working for you. And can I just ask, if you don't mind saying, can you say what line of work you're in and what you want the exemption for?
I don't particularly want the exemption. I'm a support worker, a bank support worker. I do very few hours, and in fact I got the letter today after appeal. I was dismissed, unable to go to work from the 11th of November, but now reversed that, and they're allowing me to go back until the end of March, which is a bit strange. I'm sure there'll be regulations, but they said that the only exemption they would accept is the 119, which I don't really want to go down that route.
No. So let me just ask one question quickly. Just what's your personal reason for not wanting to go down the 119 route?
Because the union has explained that really it's a contract with the government, and the idea, the final aim is to put everyone on the credit system, the digital, etc., etc. It's just a theme.
Which union are you talking about when you say the union?
It's the Workers of England Union.
Okay, all right, fine. So there are two unions at the moment who are helping support workers, helping people with exemptions. One is the Workers of England Union, and the other one is the National Employees Union. And they have, I've spoken to them both. I've spoken more so to the National Employees Union, and that's who we had on last month. Edward Lowe from the National Employees Union was who was on the call last month answering questions. Now, having had a lot of conversations with Edward, I'm very comfortable and confident with recommending that particular union. And I'm not saying don't go for the Workers of England. I'm just not. So I'm not saying choose one over the other. What I am saying is that over the conversations I've had with Edward, I can recommend that union because I know the strategy that they're taking. Now, there's the law and there's a strategy. Okay, so the law is what I've set out in that video, Assert Your Vax Exemption, because it tells you, as you say quite rightly, if you do not give consent, if you are not able to give informed consent for whatever reason, say, for example, you don't have the relevant information. So that's a whole legal topic that you can talk about, is what the relevant information is. So if you don't give informed consent, if you don't give consent, then quite correctly, that is a reason to not be vaccinated. And the distinction that we need to make is medical exemption, which is the wording that the government is now using, and the term clinical reason not to be vaccinated, which is, it sounds the same, and it's subtly different, but it's actually very different in practice, because the term I'm going to say is clinical reason not to be vaccinated is different from medical reason, and medical exemption is very different. So the subtle difference is that it's a reason not to be vaccinated and it's a clinical reason. So a clinical reason not to be vaccinated includes that you can't be vaccinated if you don't give informed consent, because the law says if there's not informed consent, you cannot be vaccinated. You know, you can't be given medical treatment against your consent. And that is a clinical reason, because a clinician cannot give you a treatment that you don't consent to. So that's a clinical reason. But what the government is doing is twisting the law, which is in the statute. So the wording clinical reason not to be vaccinated is in the legislation, and that's written law. Right? Yes, it's a regulation, so it's secondary legislation. So let's not get caught up in that, but it is the written law. When you interpret the written law, if you use different words that then subtly change the meaning, that's not the law. So what the government is saying, that all these forms are saying medical exemption, medical reason, this is incorrect. But you can be banging your head against a brick wall, arguing that with your employer. So what I would say to you, Mercedes, is I would say that the National Employees Union is a union that can help you to get across that. And what they'll do is they'll recommend that you get a meeting with your employer and you'll discuss these issues face-to-face or on a Zoom call. And somebody from the union will be able to sit with you, not in an adversarial capacity, but somebody as a go-between to be able to convey the message and the law to your employer and explain to them why they should accept your reason not to be vaccinated and why they should continue to employ you. So that's how the union can help you. And they do have a strategy. And, you know, if you submit an NHS temporary exemption form, for instance, which is now the temporary exemptions, in my view, and this is my personal view, this temporary exemption is a misnomer, because you exempt yourself from the medical treatment by saying I don't want it, and that's as permanent as you want it to be. So this government temporary exemption, which we'll put in inverted commas, is kind of a tool that they're using. But if you want to keep your job, you can use this tool and you can use this strategy to go along the line and go along the way and continue to have these conversations with your employer, which will hopefully enable you to get to the point where they will accept your your exemption. And that will be, you know, every situation is unique and different. So the conversation you have with your employer will be different to the conversation that somebody else has with their employer. And it's very much a heart to heart, it's a person to person conversation. So does that make sense? So what I'm saying essentially, Mercedes, is I just recommend it. The best thing I can recommend to you is to have a chat with National Employees Union, maybe get on their books and see if they can arrange a meeting and get things moving for you. Does that answer your question a little bit?
I've done all that with my current union, to be honest, Nina. And the National Employees Union is quite a bit more expensive, I have to say. I don't earn enough.
Well, all I can say is that's the one I'm recommending, because I don't know what the Workers of England Union are doing, but I do know, and I do have confidence in what the National Employees Union. And again, you know, I don't want to say I'm favouring one over the other. I'm just saying I have enough knowledge of what the National Employees Union is and their strategy and their thinking behind the strategy. You know,
and I heard them sorry, Edward came across very well, but I have been through that. I've done the grievance, I've done the appeal, and we've explained the law, etc., the difference between medical and clinical, but it hasn't made any difference whatsoever. But thank you anyway. Thank you. But
okay.
My question was really whether legally, if you put I do not consent on the form, that puts the legal duty on whoever's signing that form to agree to an exemption or not, because that's what somebody said on Zoom.
Right. Yeah. So if you write on a form, I do not consent, you can't force somebody into a contract and get them to agree to what you've written just by getting them to sign the form. No, that doesn't work. That's not how the law works. It doesn't work like that, because there's such a thing as an unlawful contract and an unfair contract. So when you get the common law theory groups saying things like you're entering into a contract by doing this and that, no, that's not correct. You can't enter into a contract without knowing what the contract is. So, and that is the law, actually. You know, you can't, if you don't have the relevant information, if you don't know what you're signing, then there are laws that protect you from, unwittingly signing up to something. So is that a suitable answer to your question about that?
I'm not sure. Don't worry.
So you can't. What I'm saying is, you can say to your employer, I don't consent, and then you can end up, banging your head against a brick wall, because you're saying I don't consent, therefore, and you need to keep employing, and they're saying, well, we don't, and then they could sack you. But then where are you going to end up? So you're then going to end up either sacked, or you're going to end up in a, or in a legal suit. So again, with CACUK, we're doing a class action against the government. This is the main case, but we might end up taking, an interim case, starting an interim case, and this is also what the National Employees Union are doing, to fighting this particular issue, right? Because these are issues that if you're saying one thing and the other party is saying another thing, and you can't reach agreement out of court, that's when the court comes in, right? Because all these negotiations that you're doing out of court, all these conversations you're having, whether verbally or in writing, by an email or by letter, these are all conversations, part of the policy, part of the process for taking things into court is you've got to have tried to settle it by normal, reasonable means. And if you're getting to loggerheads, then you take it into court. So you need to decide. I mean, I'm just not just talking to you, so everyone. So people need to decide how far they want to push things and how far they want to compromise. And if they're absolutely not willing to compromise and they want to keep pushing and pushing to the end, and people are in a position where, they know they're going to lose their jobs. So, are you prepared to take it all the way to the court? And some people are and some people aren't, because it's a difficult decision to make then. It's a lot of stress in itself. So is that all right? I want to just go on to another question, if that's okay, and it might be probably on the same issue, but is that okay for me to continue? So I'm going to go to Al. I know you had your hand up for a while. Do you want to unmute yourself? No, maybe not. So I've also, unmute is not working. It should be working now. Al, do you want to try?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's possible many of the questions will be the same. I saw in chat that people are asking similar questions, such as Emma and others. I did mention this in the Telegram group. One of the things that I'm having an issue with, first of all, let me just introduce myself. I'm an IT manager in an NHS trust. I work in, it actually doesn't matter where I work. So my issue is that 7 of my staff don't want to get vaccinated, which is fine because I don't want to get vaccinated either. My manager, he had a conversation with me on Wednesday saying that although we're not going to fire anyone, that we're going to have to sort of ground the staff that are unvaccinated. To be honest, I didn't really like that, but then I did look at the video that you posted earlier, how to do your vaccine rights. My manager is sort of slightly sympathetic. I think if I did a self-exemption for myself, he probably would accept it. But would that be the route to go? I mean, if he's sent an email in writing saying, yeah, I've seen his exemption, would that be the route to go? Because obviously I'm not in the care industry, I'm in the IT side of the NHS. So would that be the correct way to go, and would that even be valid with all this?
Okay, would it be the correct way to go, and would it be valid? So I'm going to say anything is valid, because the bottom line on the law, as far as I can see it, and I think I'm in agreement with lawyers on this, is that there is no legal right to force anybody to vaccinate. So yes, it will be valid. Anything is valid. If you said to your employer, I don't want to be vaccinated, then that's valid. So yeah, you can use a PROMIC form, you can write your own self-exemption, and you don't have to disclose your reasons. So as to whether they can be grounded, I think I answered that in the Telegram chat on a matter of principle as well, that on a matter of principle, I think that would be unlawful, right? Because who can restrict people's employment rights? So the authority that I'm getting this opinion from is the bioethics declaration. So there's a thing called the Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. Sorry if I've got that wrong way. It's UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. And it says, Article 6.1, it says that something along the lines of, nobody shall have to undergo any medical treatment or intervention, and that includes testing, without their informed consent. So the consent must be free and involuntary. The free and voluntary prior informed consent is the wording, and that you shouldn't have to suffer any disadvantage or prejudice as a result of your decision. Okay, so if your employer, so on a point of basic law, if your employer is putting restrictions on people because of their decision not to undergo medical treatment, then they would be breaching that that article. Okay, so the UK is a signee to this declaration. That means we should abide by these principles, and it also is echoed in English law as well. In the informed consent. So you can't punish somebody for their decision to not undergo medical treatment. And of course, that includes testing and masks as well as vaccines. Does that answer your question? And do you want to just follow up with what your next point is on that? So in terms of, does that help, and what else is the issue on top of that?
I mean, I think that helps. Well, I did manage to find the draft legislation. So I think in the group I asked, where is the update? I didn't find the final one, but I did find the draft one, and it's similar. It's almost identical to the one that you posted in your that other video. So I did mention to my manager that if any of my staff do show exemptions, and I did show him the legislation as well. And again,
Al, what legislation are you talking about?
The new draft legislation, which talks about frontline.
For NHS. Okay, all right.
Yes, yeah. So I did show him that, and the exemption, as far as I can see, it says that if you're exempt, then you're allowed to enter the building if you're a staff member and carry on working there. So when I mentioned that to him, he was keen to. Actually, keen is the wrong word. He was sympathetic to letting the staff carry on working on site on the sites that they're allowed to, rather than being grounded. So I guess that's hopefully if I can get that in writing from him once I show my exemption and the exemption of my staff, then hopefully that may solve my issue.
I think what you're doing is fantastic, Al, and all I would say is just keep going with that conversation. And it's you know, obviously it sounds as if you've had really positive conversations, because you're talking on a very human level with your boss, and your boss is reasonable and sympathetic to what you're saying. And I would just say keep on having that conversation with them, and you know, and try to sort of guide them along and guide and inform them. And yeah, it sounds like you're doing a really good job. And again, like, you know, your situation should really encourage other people as well, because it's not what you know, it's how you put it across, and it's whether or not that person is reasonable. So if the person's going to be reasonable, then you're going to have a slightly different conversation to what you would have if the person was unreasonable. So if they're playing hardball, you know, you have to go a bit more hardball in response. So this is the kind of thing that I'm trying to get at when I say it's about asserting your rights. It's how you put it across, right? So no, I think you're doing great, and you know, keep us posted in the Telegram group, and yeah, just let me know how you get on. I'm going to go on to somebody else, and I know that Doris A has had a question and a hand up for a while. Doris, do you want to speak? Oh, sorry, Doris, you can unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for doing this and all the information you're putting out there. It's really deeply appreciated. I'm in a bit of a, I'm wanting an exemption, but I'm actually not working at the moment, but I've got quite a lot of medical stuff, which means potentially going into hospital for tests and all this kind of stuff. So I do have a doctor. Unfortunately, he's not on, it's not my GP, but he's treated me on and off for quite a few years, NHS and privately, who said he will write a letter to my doctor. So I'm hopeful maybe that will help. But I just wondered, I feel a bit like I don't know if I can't really get union support, or I feel like I probably need someone to come in with me to see my doctor. I just wondered if you could sort of speak to that.
Yeah, so you're basically saying you want to avoid restrictions, but you've got medical treatments coming up and you want to avoid.
Well, yeah, I've had sort of long-term medical stuff for quite a while, which I dealt with in many other ways, you know, taking the absolute minimal kind of you know, medical procedures, and I want to carry on doing that. I don't want any more. I've had sort of damage done to my body by medical procedures, and I don't want any more of that. But it's hard. They're stopping people coming into hospital with you and all this kind of stuff if you have to go in for tests. So it's getting pretty full on, and a bit hard to manage.
So I just want to be clear. What is it that you want to actually do or achieve?
Well, what I would like to do is get a medical exemption from my GP.
For the vaccination?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So if you want a medical exemption from your GP based on the NHS rules, and go with that system, then you've got to be, have particular conditions that they recognise. For example, autism is one, right? If you were autistic, if you were diagnosed autistic, you'd almost certainly have an immediate, route to exemption, right? It doesn't sound like you have something that would be identifiable that, unless you know of something that would be identifiable that would just give you instant exemption. So go on.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to go into my medical history here, obviously, but
sure.
What was I going to say? It seems to me that the categories are a bit sort of, doesn't it say and included? So that the categories sort of seem very, very rigid, but in a way they're kind of not.
So there are no categories. So again, on a point of general law, so I'm just going to sort of inform on a point of general law. When you see a list and you see the wording can include the following, what that means in law is that this is not an exhaustive list. So anytime you see the words could include, right, which is what you will see on the exemption forms, it means it could include the following or anything else. Okay, so what's anything else? That's anything else that's, and there's a word in law called reasonable. So anything else that's reasonable could be included. And then you ask yourself, well, what is reasonable? So reasonable depends on the circumstances and the context. So reasonable in the context of vaccines, for instance, could be you have a reasonable reason to doubt the efficacy of the vaccines or to doubt their the possible harm or injury that you might suffer from taking the vaccine. And that's absolutely reasonable. So for instance, you could adapt that form to include anybody in your family history, brothers, sisters, cousins, parents, grandparents who have any kind of neurological disorder, because not everybody knows that many neurological disorders are affected or triggered by vaccines, not just the COVID vaccines. Okay? And, this is just me speaking from my own personal research. So people may or may not agree with that, but if you would look into it, you would find that there are definite links, can't be discounted, and they're accepted within the pharmaceutical industry as well, that vaccines, the neurotoxins in vaccines, do cause neurological damage. So that's a reasonable reason. So you could add that to your non-exhaustive list. So which is why you could pretty much include anything. And I know for a fact that the Workers of England Union are using that that idea to look at the way they tackle exemptions. So that then you're in the position then, will the system recognise it? Will the system accept it? And the answer is no, because the government is abusing the law, and it's twisting the law into its own policies, which are being accepted only because of undue pressure and influence. So the government is putting, in my view, putting undue pressure and influence on businesses, industries, doctors, the medical profession, to not accept things that would be reasonable reasons to be exempt or not have vaccines. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah. So
in that sense, long story short, what I can recommend, and this is only a recommendation from me, so again, there's no affiliation here, but I've had a lot of conversations with Edward, and not only does he lead the National Employees Union, but he also has the Legal Advice Network, and they can help for non-employment issues like this. So if you approach them, I do know they're really busy, and they're probably, like everybody, need more staff. I mean, you know, and I actually, a while back, I did decide to take on personal cases if and when I could, but and it's something that I potentially could take on in a professional capacity, you know, but obviously that means, you know, it would be a paid contract, a paid, you'd be a paid client, but I just can't do it. I'm full to capacity with what I'm doing, and I just can't take on work. I can't take on personal cases. So I do know that if you approach the Legal Advice Network, they may be able to provide you with some kind of letter, some kind of exemption that could get you into where you need to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go on. Is that's okay? No worries. Yeah, so if that's okay, I'm going to go on to Ben, because you've got your hand up. Let me just allow you to unmute yourself. Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, you can unmute yourself now.
Okay, can you hear me, Mina?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering what role the CQC have in all of this, because obviously they're not the ones making the rules, but they're the ones that are sort of enforcing them in a way, because I assume they're going to be issuing fines or imposing restrictions on activity. So I work as a dentist, and we're very heavily regulated by the CQC. So yeah, I just wanted to know if you know anything about that, really. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So the CQC is a Care Quality Commission, and they oversee things like care homes, and obviously your industry is a dentist. I wasn't aware that they oversee dentists, but obviously they do. So yeah, you're quite right. The CQC are trying to impose fines for not doing certain things, but what they're imposing fines for is, let's say, for example, I know we have a care home manager on the call today, and let's say if that care home manager decided that she or he was going to apply the strict law, which is the care home regulation, which is that they need to satisfy themselves that a person has been vaccinated or shouldn't be vaccinated for clinical reasons. If they're applying the strict letter of the law and accepting people who say they're exempt without disclosing any kind of particular reason, then that would be completely lawful. And if the CQC then imposes overarching pressure or threats on that person or business to say, if you don't do this, or if you don't do it this way, or if you don't make sure that you have these NHS forms, for example, and do it in this system, then we will fine you £100,000 or £50,000, whatever. That's an unlawful fine. So the tricky situation you've got is these people and these businesses who have a lot of money, these industries or these regulating authorities who have a lot of resources and have the government's backup, are able to get away with this unlawful behaviour because they're doing it against an individual or a small business who doesn't have the resources to fight it. Okay, so that's, again, this is the predicament we're in, and you know, it is an issue in my mind constantly at the moment, whether or not CACUK, alongside this class action case, or perhaps as a way into bringing this into court, can take on a small case, you know, can bring a small, relatively smaller case like that to challenge that in the court. And the way you would challenge it is you would have to get to a situation where you've got a care home, where you've got a business, and they're in a position where they've been imposed this fine, and they're saying we're not, that then the conversation would go as follows. Business says, we're not going to pay that fine, that's unlawful. CQC says, you must, we will take you to court for this money. Okay. Yeah. Then you've got a case, because you've had the conversation out of court. The only place to go next is the court. So you've issued the relevant warnings, you've issued the relevant notices and timelines. So anytime you send a letter before court, you send a letter and you give the other person a reasonable time frame in which to respond. So that's usually 14 days, 28 days, right? And then there is, and you can't reach agreement. And then you say, I've got no other option other than to issue legal proceedings. So the legal proceedings might be issued by the CQC, who takes you to court for not paying the fine. Or they might start to close you down, and then you might be the person that takes them to court for unlawfully closing you down. And when you take that to court, you then address the issues. So you look at law, you look at what was lawful. Were they acting unlawfully, or were you acting unlawfully? Does that make sense? So
it does, yeah. So in a way, actually, because I'm actually the employer and the employee, because I own the practice, but I'm the one that doesn't really particularly want the vaccine. So is that a good position to be in? Because then I can say, right, I accept this, that we're going to impose this mandate on our staff, and then I impose it loosely to the point where I accept my own exemption.
Well, as far as I know, so are you an NHS dentist?
We have got an NHS contract, but I mean, I work mainly privately. So to lose that NHS
would
contract,
you fall under this? Would you fall under this NH workers legislation?
The condition of deployment. This is from the NHS England as a condition of deployment. We do, yes. But I mean, personally, I could distance myself from the NHS and just allow the other practitioners to treat NHS, and myself, I would just treat on a private capacity.
Yeah. So in that sense, there is absolutely no legislation, there is absolutely no law, nothing that puts any imposition on you as a private practitioner in dentistry to do anything, to be vaccinated, require your staff to be vaccinated. So there literally isn't anything. And you being the boss, I mean, are you governed by CQC, or is it just your NHS people that govern by?
Yeah, we are regulated by the CQC.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you're regulated. So, so as a private practitioner, then there's nothing on you. So you are an employer that there is no legality on you pressuring or requiring anyone to be vaccinated, including yourself. So you could say, there are no restrictions on you whatsoever.
So I could just give up my personal NHS commitment and allow the others to take that.
You could do, if you wanted. Yeah, you could do if you wanted, and if that helps you, then definitely, yeah. And there's there's so Anna Breeze has set up the Against Vaccine Passports. Have you seen that?
I've heard the name, yeah. Yeah,
so there's, I mean, if you get your business onto these platforms like Awaken Pages, Against Vaccine Passports, and then it's kind of, and also the Freedom Hub is a good one as well. So then it's opening up that alternative business, alternative trading platform that people know where they can go to, especially locally, that they don't have to worry about these restrictions, because I think that's one of the major issues that people are struggling with is the fear. And sometimes the fear comes first before they even set foot out the house to even try to go into a place where you're going to be asked for your vaccine status. So the more that this you promote yourself as somebody who is allowing unvaccinated people into your business, that's what I would say to you anyway. So I think we are running short of time, so we're at 5 minutes to 1, so I'm going to close up, and I'm sorry that I didn't get to answer other questions. I'm just going to open up and allow everybody to unmute yourself. So I'm going to close the session, but if anybody just wants to shout out or say anything, there's a couple of minutes. I'll just make it free flowing for now if you want to.
Yes, sorry, I think there is more of a student, if it's possible, and I've been advised by Workers of England Union to check our contract, because they think it's not in our contract, any mandates of vaccine. But I found there are like special requirements that are imposed by law or government in our contract, accrediting or professional bodies or other third parties. For example, there might be a requirement for medical examination or immunizations. So this is in our contract. Does it mean that we have to accept the COVID vaccine as well?
Okay, does anybody else want to answer that question?
Actually, can I try and answer that, Mina? It's Dave
Please.
Mitchell. I'm actually a computer guy, but I've been doing a bit of common law and stuff as well.
Yep.
It would actually be a violation of I think it's section 10(1) of the Equality Act. To actually, and you can't, there's also Article 6 of the Nuremberg Code, I believe, as well. It would be a violation of that as well, because it's basic human rights. You cannot discriminate against someone because of their medical status. You can't ask someone their medical status, it's confidential.
Yeah, no, that's true. All that is true. And also, just on a very on the particular point, so Petra, you're saying that it's something to do with a contract. If a contract requires you to be vaccinated, it's an unlawful contract.
Yeah.
All right, that's an unlawful contract. So the area of law is contracts, and the particular point of the area of law is unlawful contracts, and that's the root, that's the answer to anything that's, if any contract tries to mandate any medical treatment, that is an unlawful contract, because a contract is breaking the law, right? Okay, so I'm going to end. I'm actually going to end this. So, yeah, go on.
I just said thank you.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so we are shortly going to end, and I'm just going to finish this because this is obviously a recorded session. And what I'm going to try and do, because I know there were a couple of hiccups, and I don't know if I can edit. Look, if I can't edit it, there were things that were said that weren't supposed to be said. So it might be, I'm hoping that we can broadcast this, because obviously I know that a lot of people wanted to see it that couldn't. I might have somebody that could edit it out if I send it to them. So I might just kind of try and do that. Now, I think this session seemed to work, because obviously in the past what we've done is we've focused on a particular issue, but I think the issue always at the moment on the forefront of everybody's minds is the vaccine issue and the legality and things like that. So I think for next month we'll also do a similar session where we just have a free flow and bring your questions. And again, you know, I copied and pasted a few questions that I've been sent to my email. I wasn't able to read those out because I wanted to address the questions that we had in the Zoom call today. But I think a lot of the questions are on similar issues. And what I try to do is just try to kind of establish what's law and what's guidance. And for you to be able to go away and establish what's law and what's guidance, if it's on a government website, it's guidance. If it's in a piece of paper that says act, you know, the something act, or the something regulation, that's law. Okay, so unless it's a piece of paper, a PDF document that says something regulations or something act, and it sets out, you know, section 1, section 2, section 3, that's an act, that's written legislation. Anything on a government website, if they say you have to do something, or you should do something, or, you know, you are recommended to do something, this is all language, that's not law, it's only guidance. Even if they say you should, right, that's still guidance. So so I just want to kind of get, you know, kind of get people to understand that they can assess their own rights, legal rights, just by looking at the wording of stuff and how things are written out. So the next session we're going to do is going to be the first Friday of January, and I'm going to do a spiritual Zoom, which is the Namyo Horenge Kyo session, and that's going to be on determinations for 2022. So that's a personal empowerment, you know, kind of on a spiritual session, on a spiritual level. Then the next one, we're going to do the second Friday, and then the third Friday of January, again, we'll do the legal surgery. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. So, okay, thank you very much. So thanks everybody for joining.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas. Have a great Christmas. And enjoy yourselves, whatever you do.
Merry Christmas all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mina.